This encounter happened to me in 2016. And I'll admit to you, at that point in time, I found myself in a strange place. I had recently lost my job. And if it wasn't for the substantial amount of savings that I had, man, I really would have been screwed. But as time passed on and my savings started to dwindle from paying rent and bills, I decided the best thing for me to do was to live out of my van. So I decided I was going to have the most epic road trip. Take 90 days, travel around, enjoy the world, and then try and find another job. Now pause right here. Let me say this to you. I started playing poker when I was 12 years old. My dad taught me how to play poker at the kitchen table. I played with him and his friends. When I tell you him and his friends were poker sharks, I'm talking about the kind of guys that played in poker tournaments and won. And so while I was traveling on the road, and when I got low on money, I would stop by a local casino and wait for an evolution of people to come to the table that were suckers. Now, if you don't know this about poker, there's always somebody who's at a poker table who's too aggressive, or there's somebody who's too afraid. And if you know how to pinpoint their tendencies, you can walk into a casino with $150 and walk out with $1,000 if you know what you're doing. Now, the circumstances that led up to my Dogman encounter weren't directly correlated to the fact that I played poker. It was more correlated to the fact that I was low on money and I was heading to play some poker. I find myself on the road, I-20, headed from Marshall, Texas to Shreveport, Louisiana, when I get a flat tire. It's 2:30 a.m. and I'm not sure if you're familiar with I-20, but people speed on I-20 and it's pitch black out there. I'm trying to change this tire while my vehicle is on an incline on one of those steep Texas hills. When I tell you this was a hairy situation I found myself in, this was a rough one because I wanted to make sure that my vehicle didn't roll backwards. So I went into the woods, found rocks, came out, put rocks behind the front tires, and I'm sitting there working to jack this van up into the air and put the spare tire on when a pickup truck pulls up behind me. Now, 2:00 in the morning, the pickup truck pulls up on you on the side of the road. There are bright lights on, and you got to be prepared for anything. So now I'm standing there with the tire iron in my hand as this young man gets out of his vehicle and says, "Hey, sir, how can I help you?" And let me say this. This gentleman was the most pleasant person I have ever met in my life. He walks over to me. He says, "Hey, I saw you on the side of the road. I figured you needed some help. Do you mind if I help you get your tire changed and make sure you get back on the road safely?" Listen, there are times when being a poker player and being able to read people is an advantage. And this was one of those times. This kid didn't give off any bad vibes whatsoever. In fact, I felt like I was safe just because he was around. And so we get to changing the tire and he starts talking to me and he says, "Where are you going?" And eventually I start telling him a little bit about my story. Telling him I'm headed to a casino because I need to play some poker, because I need to make some money. And I've been traveling around in my van. He starts to ask me where I've been. Just as we've got the spare tire on and I'm putting the other tire in the back of the van, he says, "When's the last time you went to church?" I look at this kid, and by kid, I mean 23, 24 years old. And I say, quite frankly, I haven't been to church in years. That's when he goes on to explain to me that he's a youth pastor at a place called Church of Uncertain. Now stop, pause right here. I done heard a whole bunch of church names. The Church of Christ, the Church of the Latter-day Saints, St. Elmo's Church, St. Pius Church. I had never heard of anything called Church of Uncertain. So now I'm standing there thinking to myself, okay, all right, this kid's probably in some kind of cult, and that's why he's giving off this vibe. Now, as I'm shaking his hand to thank him, he says, "Listen, I pulled over on the side of the road because God wanted me to stop and talk to you. And so if you just allow me for a few seconds, let me share something with you." And right there on the side of the road in the middle of the morning, he shared the gospel of Jesus Christ with me and invited me to come to his church. Now, something weird happened when I shook this man's hand. This feeling came over me, this feeling of peace, like no matter what was going on, everything was going to be all right. He hands me this little business card with the church's address and says, "Listen, next time you're coming in this direction, stop by the church on a Sunday morning. I would love to see you there." And then he turns around, gets in his vehicle, and leaves. I head on into Shreveport, pull into the casino parking lot, catch a couple of Z's. The next day I go to the poker table, and when I tell you I rack in the money, I go in the door with $250 and leave out with $2,500. $2,500. When I finally head back to the van, I'm laying there catching some sleep, and it dawns on me, I think I'm going to go check out this church, the Church of Uncertain. Now, stop right here and let me say this in the story. What happened to me next had absolutely nothing to do with this church. I'm 100% certain of that. These were phenomenal people, real homely people. Everyone knew each other, kind, sweet, loving. But when I left there, what I encountered, boy, it was the exact opposite. So I head on over to a tire shop, get a new tire, come back to the casino, do some more gambling. I gamble all day Saturday, go back to the van, go to sleep, wake up in the morning, and I start heading to this address in a town called Uncertain, Texas. Now, let me say this about these people at this church. First of all, I want to thank them. And I did thank them before I left, because it was during that church service at the Church of Uncertain in Texas that I realized something. I realized that my life wasn't bad off at all. And in fact, I realized that God loved me so much that as a 12-year-old little boy, I learned how to play poker, and I was able to sustain myself from a skill that I learned at 12 years old. But I also learned that day when the pastor was preaching that God wanted more for me. Also, after church, we had a bite to eat, and it was just the most amazing experience. It felt like being at home with family. And that youth pastor who helped me on the side of the road, he was there. And when I tell you this young man was ecstatic to see me, he was absolutely ecstatic to see me. Now, let me say this to you. What happened after leaving that church, I do not attribute it to the church or God or anything else. I really just believe I picked the wrong place to decide to spend the night. Because I head on over to a campground right around Cato Lake, park my van, hang out outside, smoke a few cigarettes, listen to music, relax, chill. I mean, it was an awesome day. One of the most awesome days I had in quite a long time. And then the freaking sun went down. And when I tell you, there's nothing more spooky than the border of Texas and Louisiana. When the sun goes down, man, I tell you, there's nothing more spooky than that. 9 p.m. rolls around. I got everything locked down. I got my seatbelts attached to my door handles so nobody can sneak into the vehicle. I lay it down. I go to sleep, and wham. Now, I'm not sure if you ever heard the sound of sharp nails scratching on glass, but I learned at 1 a.m. that's exactly what I was hearing. This high-pitched screeching sound. And when I open my eyes and move the curtains, I see this paw, not a hand, a giant paw with these long nails just scratching along the window on the back side of my van. Now stop, pause right here, and let me say this. At first, in my mind, this was somebody playing a joke on me. I'm thinking, okay, they got some local kids in the area. Maybe it's some kids from the church, or maybe it's some of their friends. I don't know who it is, but they decide they're going to come out here and they're going to play a joke on me. And it wasn't until the van began to slide, not shake, but slide, that I realized that no, this is not a game. There is something outside of my van strong enough to push this van like it's the Incredible Hulk, and it is sliding my van towards 2 trees. Now, let me say this to you. I'm looking through the window trying to see what's pushing the van, and all I see is fur. Imagine if your German Shepherd or your Collie was big enough to where it put its waist up against the back window of your van, and that fur was pressed up against the glass. That's all I'm seeing. So now I go into panic mode. Mind you, I am in nothing but boxers. I hop up, climb to the front of the van, unbuckle the seatbelt, get into the front seat, crank it up, and start to drive off. As I'm driving off, this thing is pushing the van, forcing me to go in circles. I'm talking about my foot is down on the gas and it is pushing me, forcing me to spin around in circles. When I look through the side view mirror, is the very first time I get a glimpse at what people call Dogman, and this thing was massive. Gigantic shoulders, big old biceps, huge legs. It has its upper body pressed up against my van like it's doing push-ups. And I'm saying to myself, I am about to die. I'm not sure why I was doing this. Maybe I was panicking, but I decided to blow the horn and just lay my hand on the horn. Burn. If anybody was nearby, they would hear the horn blowing and they would come and help me. Now, as I start to blow the horn, the van stops spinning and starts moving straight forward. But now I'm headed through the trees, headed towards the lake. And so now I have to cut the wheel, dodge trees, spin the van around, dodge more trees, and get back onto the roadway. As I'm cutting that wheel and heading back to that roadway, I see this thing making a beeline straight for me, running on its hind legs. Let me say this to you. Back in those days, I wasn't the kind of guy who carried guns on him. In fact, I felt there was no need for a gun, but after this encounter and this experience, trust me, I have loads and loads of guns. But I'm driving off, it's making this beeline for me, and it goes into this cluster of trees. And truthfully, I've been thinking about this for years, trying to figure out why did it stop in that cluster of trees? Why didn't it go any further? But it gets into this cluster of trees, and I don't know if it couldn't fit through them or if it didn't want to run over them. I don't know what the reason was. But it gets into that cluster of trees, and it just stops. But me, I don't stop driving. I don't stop driving until I get back on I-20 and start headed back to Shreveport. When I'm on I-20, I pull over, hop in the back of the van, throw my clothes on, drive back to the casino, and park in the damn parking lot.
Do things seem off? Trouble sleeping? Issues in your marriage, finances, or with extended family and friends? These are challenges that many men face, but you don't have to face them alone. The Men of Steel prayer group is here for you. We are a fellowship of individuals who share a common interest in the paranormal and cryptid fields, united in our quest for understanding the supernatural. Our goal is to educate and guide those curious or seeking insight into the supernatural, emphasizing the role of Jesus Christ as the supreme authority over the supernatural realm. Visit us at strongmenpraying.com to learn more. The Men of Steel prayer group, where faith and curiosity forge a stronger spirit.